The red emergency lights flashed across the command center of the Zephyrian flagship. Admiral Cathara stood before the massive viewing screen, his forearms crossed behind his back as he watched the battle reports stream in. Each new update brought worse news than the last. "Sir, we have lost contact with Battle Group 7, reported Commander Vextel from his station. His voice carried the strain that all Zephyrians felt when facing defeat. That makes 3 full battle groups. In the past 6 hours, Cathara closed his large, dark eyes for a moment. Battle Group 7 had contained some of their finest ships and most experienced crews. Now they were gone, consumed by the terrible enemy that had appeared from the void between galaxies. The Void Swarm, as the scientists called them, moved like a plague across space. They ate everything in their path and grew stronger with each system they destroyed. "What about the Centauran fleet?" Cathara asked. "Still holding position at the outer rim, sir. But their logic computers cannot find a solution to this threat. Admiral Vexan reports that every battle scenario ends in total defeat. The Centaurans were known throughout the galaxy for their perfect logic and mathematical minds. If they could not solve this problem, then perhaps no one could." Cathara felt a cold fear creep through his body. The Void Swarm had already consumed 12 star systems. Billions of lives were gone, turned into raw material for the enemy's endless hunger. "Sir," called Lieutenant Yorth from the communications station, "we are receiving a priority message from the Altarian High Council." The main screen changed to show the image of Counselor Lyrish, her crystalline features glowing within her. Light, even through the transmission, Cathara could see the fear in her ancient eyes. "Admiral Cathara," she began, her melodic voice carrying across space. "Our psychic networks have felt the death screams of entire worlds. The Void Swarm grows stronger with each victory. We estimate you have perhaps 36 hours before they reach the core systems." 36 hours. Cathara felt his hearts skip a beat. The core systems contained over 50 billion souls across 7 worlds. The thought of losing so many lives made him sick. "Counselor, what about the new weapons from the Nexari research stations? The quantum disruptors were supposed to be ready for field testing." Lyra shook her head sadly. "The void entities adapt too quickly. They absorbed our quantum energy and used it to grow larger. Admiral, we must consider all options now, even the most unthinkable ones." Cathara knew what she meant. In the corner of his command center sat a communication terminal that had not been used in over 50 years. It bore the crude symbol of Earth, a simple blue and green sphere that looked primitive compared to the elegant symbols of the true galactic powers. The humans had been asking for full membership in the Galactic Federation for decades. They had the numbers, over 8 billion of them spread across dozens of worlds. They had resources and manufacturing ability that impressed even the Centaurans. But they also had something that made the advanced species uncomfortable. They had violence. Human history was written in blood and war. Where other species had evolved beyond physical conflict, humans still celebrated their warriors and built monuments to their battles. They carried weapons even in peacetime and spoke casually of death and destruction. The Federation had voted many times to keep them as associate members only, useful for mining and basic labor, but too dangerous for real responsibility. "You cannot be serious about contacting them," said Commander Vextel. "Humans are barely above the level of animals. Their technology is primitive. Their ships are slow and crude. And yet they have more ships than any other 3 species combined," Hadar replied quietly. "Commander, bring up the human military reports." The screen filled with data that most Federation officers tried to ignore. The humans had over 800 military vessels spread across their territory. Most were small by galactic standards, but they were numerous, and their crews were known for being absolutely fearless in battle. "Sir, their weapons are kinetic projectiles and chemical explosives," Maxtell protested. "They still use nuclear fusion for power. Their computers are made of metal and silicon instead of living crystal. How could such primitive tools help us against an enemy that has defeated our best technology?" Cathara studied the reports more carefully. The humans had fought dozens of wars among themselves before joining the galactic community. Even now, they maintained massive military forces and trained constantly for battle. While other species had found peaceful solutions to their problems, humans still settled disputes with organized violence. It was barbaric. It was primitive. It was also exactly what the Federation needed right now. "Open a channel to Earth Central." "Command," Cathara ordered. "Sir, the other admirals will not approve. The Altarians find human thoughts too chaotic to read clearly. The Centaurans cannot understand their illogical decision-making. The Nexari say human emotions interfere with proper energy flow. If we bring humans into this battle, we risk what, Commander? Looking bad in front of our graves?" Cathara's voice carried the authority of command. "Send the message." The communication array hummed to life, sending signals across hundreds of light years to the human home system. It would take several minutes for the transmission to reach Earth and several more for a reply. Cathara used the time to study what little data the Federation had on human military capabilities. The reports made for interesting reading. Humans had developed their technology along completely different lines than the rest of the galaxy. Where? Other species had mastered energy manipulation and quantum mechanics. Humans had focused on raw power and brute force engineering. Their ships were built like fortresses, designed to take damage and keep fighting. Their weapons were simple but devastating. "Incoming transmission from Earth," Lieutenant Yorth announced. The screen flickered and showed the face of a human female. She had short dark hair and brown eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. Her uniform was plain gray fabric with simple metal badges. Compared to the flowing robes and crystal armor of other species, she looked almost primitive. "This is Commander Sarah Chun of Earth Defense Command," she said in the harsh, guttural language humans called English. The translation system made her words understandable, but could not hide the aggressive undertones. "We received your emergency transmission, Admiral. What do you need?" Cathara felt his pride rebel against what he was about to do. For over 200 years, his people had led the galaxy's military forces. They had brought peace and order to dozens of species. Now he was going to ask for help from creatures that most civilized beings considered barely above savages. "Commander Chun, the Federation faces an existential threat. An enemy from outside our galaxy has destroyed multiple star systems. Our conventional forces have proven ineffective. We require additional ships for a final defensive action." The human's expression did not change, but something shifted in her eyes. Cathara had seen that look before, in the eyes of predators that had caught the scent of prey. "How many ships do you need, Admiral?" "All of them." Commander Chun was quiet for several seconds. When she spoke again, her voice was carefully controlled. "I see. And what role would human forces play in this defensive action?" Cathara forced himself to meet her gaze through the screen. "Front-line assault. Your ships would engage the enemy first, while our main forces position for the primary attack." He did not say what they both knew. He was asking humans to die so that more valuable species could live. He was asking them to serve as a shield of flesh and metal while the real military forces prepared to fight. "I understand, Admiral. Earth Command will mobilize our entire fleet. We can have 300 ships ready for departure within 12 hours. 300 ships? More than Cathara had dared to hope for. But looking at the calm expression on the human commander's face, he wondered if he had just made a terrible Mistake. There was something in her eyes that suggested she understood exactly what he was asking for, and that she was planning to give him far more than he had bargained for. The space around Kepler 442 looked like a graveyard. Broken pieces of alien ships drifted slowly through the darkness, their once beautiful hulls torn apart by weapons that consumed matter itself. Admiral Cathara stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the debris field grow larger with each passing hour. "Sir, another Centauran destroyer just went dark," reported Commander Vextil. His voice had lost all emotion over the past 3 days of constant retreat. "That leaves us with 42 operational vessels out of the original 200. Cathara nodded without looking away from the main screen. The Void Swarm had pushed them back across 3 star systems in less than a week. Every battle ended the same way. The aliens would fight bravely, using their most advanced weapons and tactics. The Void entities would adapt and grow stronger. Then the aliens would run, leaving behind more dead friends and broken dreams. Movement on the outer sensor grid, called Lieutenant Yorth. Multiple contacts dropping out of faster-than-light travel. The main screen shifted to show the edge of the system. Cathara felt his heart sink as he saw the approaching ships. They were huge and blocky, with none of the elegant curves that marked proper starship design. Thick armor plates covered every surface, and strange metal tubes stuck out at odd angles. They looked more like flying fortresses than spaceships. "Identification confirms human vessels, sir. I count ... 297 ships total. 297. Cathara had expected perhaps 50 human vessels at most. The Federation records showed that humans had ships, but no one had bothered to count them carefully. Now he was looking at a fleet larger than anything the galaxy had seen in over a century. "Sir, receiving communication from the human fleet," Lieutenant Yorth announced. The screen changed to show Commander Chun's face again. She looked exactly the same as she had 12 hours ago, but now Cathara could see the bridge behind her. It was cramped and dark, filled with screens showing numbers and symbols instead of the flowing artistic displays preferred by civilized species. Human crew members moved quickly between stations, all wearing the same gray uniforms and serious expressions. "Admiral Cathara, this is Commander Chun aboard the Earth vessel Normandy. Human Expeditionary Fleet has arrived as requested. You are ready to receive battle orders." "Commander Chun," Cathara began, trying to keep the surprise out of his voice. "Your fleet is larger than we expected. This is ... unexpected." Chun's expression did not change. "Earth takes threats to galactic peace seriously, Admiral. We brought everything we could spare from home defense." Cathara studied the human ships on his tactical display. They were arranged in a loose formation that made no sense according to proper military doctrine. Advanced species flew in precise, geometric patterns that allowed for maximum efficiency and coordination. The humans looked like they were just scattered randomly through space. "Commander, we need to discuss your role in the coming battle. The Void Swarm is approximately 6 hours away from this position. Our combined fleet will make a final stand here to protect the core systems." "Understood, Admiral." "What are your orders?" Cathara felt uncomfortable with what he was about to say, but there was no choice. The human ships were clearly not built for advanced tactics. Their weapons appeared to be simple kinetic devices, metal projectiles fired by chemical or magnetic force. Against an enemy that could absorb energy and adapt to quantum weapons, such primitive tools would be useless. "Human vessels will form the first line of defense. Your ships will engage the void entities as they enter the system, drawing their attention and forcing them to commit their forces. This will allow our main battle groups to position for decisive strikes against their command vessels." Sean was quiet for several seconds. Around her, the human bridge crew continued their work, but Cathara noticed that several of them had stopped to listen. Their faces showed no emotion, but something in their posture suggested they understood exactly what was being asked of them. "You want us to be bait," Chun said finally. "I would not use that term, Commander. Your forces will serve as the advance guard, engaging the enemy while more advanced units prepare for the primary assault." "Bait," Chun repeated. "How long do you need us to hold them?" "Preliminary estimates suggest 20 to 30 minutes should be sufficient for proper positioning." Chun nodded slowly. "I see. Admiral, may I ask what casualties you expect from this advance guard action?" Cathara felt his mouth go dry. The question was reasonable, but no civilized commander would ask it so directly. Advanced species preferred to discuss such matters in abstract terms, using mathematics and probability theory to avoid thinking about actual death. "Combat projections are difficult to calculate precisely," he said carefully. "Admiral, my people need to know what they're walking into. What percentage of human ships do you expect to survive the first 30 minutes? The brutal directness of the question made Cathara uncomfortable. But looking at Chun's calm face, he realized she was not going to accept a diplomatic non-answer. "Computer projections suggest 20 to 30% survival rate for forward units," he admitted. Nodded again. "So you expect 70 to 80% of my people to die in the first half hour of battle?" "Commander, I understand this is difficult to accept, but no, Admiral, it's fine. We understand the situation." Chun's voice was perfectly steady. "Human fleet accepts the mission. We'll hold the line for 30 minutes. Kefir blinked in surprise. He had expected protests, demands for better positioning, or at least requests for additional support. Instead, the human commander had simply accepted a mission that would likely kill most of her people. "Are you certain, Commander? Perhaps we could discuss alternative formations." "Admiral, with respect, we know what you're asking us to do. You need something to slow down the enemy while you get ready for the real fight. We can do that." The transmission ended, leaving Cathara staring at a blank screen. Around him, his bridge crew worked in uncomfortable silence. Commander Vextel finally spoke what they were all thinking. "Sir, are we really going to send them to die like that?" "They are volunteers, Commander, and their sacrifice may save billions of lives in the core systems." But even as he said it, Cathara felt a strange unease. Something about the human commander's reaction bothered him. She had accepted the mission too easily, with too little emotion. In his experience, species facing certain death usually showed fear, anger, or at least sadness. Chun had shown nothing except calm professionalism. On the tactical display, the human fleet was moving into position. Their ships spread out in a loose line across the system's outer edge, facing the direction from which the void swarm would arrive. They moved slowly compared to more advanced vessels, but they moved with purpose. "Sir, the humans are requesting permission to launch reconnaissance drones," Lieutenant Yorth reported. "Granted, though I doubt their primitive sensors will detect anything our systems have missed." As the human drones spread out through space, Cathara studied the enemy approach vector. The void swarm was still hours away, but their energy signature was growing stronger. Soon they would arrive in overwhelming numbers, hungry for the destruction of everything in their path. The Admiral forced himself to stop thinking about the humans who would die in the coming battle. War required difficult choices, and the needs of the many outweighed the needs of the few. The human ships were expendable. Their technology was primitive, their tactics simple, and their strategic value limited. Better to lose them than the advanced vessels that would be needed for the real fight. But as he watched the human fleet take position, Admiral Cathara could not shake the feeling that he was missing something important. The humans had accepted a suicide mission without question. They had brought nearly 300 ships to a fight they knew they could not win. And their commander had shown no fear When told that most of her people would die, in his long military career, Cathara had learned to trust his instincts. Right now, those instincts were telling him that the humans were not what they seemed. But with the void swarm approaching and time running out, he had no choice but to proceed with the plan. He could only hope that the sacrifice of the human fleet would buy enough time for a miracle. The first warning came from the long-range sensors at exactly 0347 hours, ship time. Lieutenant Yorth's voice cut through the quiet tension on the bridge like a knife through flesh. Contact. Multiple large objects dropping out of faster than light. Travel at the system edge. Distance 47 million kilometers and closing. Admiral Cathara moved to the tactical display, his forearms working quickly to bring up detailed sensor readings. What he saw made his blood run cold. The void swarm had arrived in force. Over 60 massive vessels, each one larger than his flagship. Behind them came countless smaller entities, moving in perfect coordination like a school of deadly fish. All ships, battle stations, Cathara ordered. This is not a drill. Throughout the fleet, alien crews rushed to their positions. On Centauran vessels, logic computers began calculating firing solutions and defensive patterns. Altarian ships glowed, brighter as their psychic crews linked minds for coordinated action. The elegant Nexari energy beings prepared their quantum weapons for battle. At the edge of the system, the human fleet waited in their crude formation. Their ships looked tiny compared to the approaching void entities, like metal insects facing a pack of spaceborne giants. Cathara felt a moment of regret for what was about to happen to those brave, stupid humans. Time to contact, 18 minutes, Vextel reported. The void swarm is moving faster than previous encounters. Estimated speed increase of 23%. They are learning, Cathara muttered. Each battle teaches them more about our tactics. On the main screen, the approaching enemy looked like a moving nightmare. The void entities were not built like normal ships. Instead, they appeared to be living creatures that had grown into the shape of spacecraft. Their hulls pulsed with organic rhythms, and strange tendrils waved in the vacuum of space. Some were covered in what looked like scales or armor plates made from consumed starship metal. "Sir, receiving transmission from Commander Chun," Lieutenant Yorth announced. The screen split to show the human commander's face. Behind her, the bridge was now lit with red warning lights, and crew members moved with quick efficiency. Chun herself looked completely calm, as if she was about to go for a peaceful walk instead of leading her people into certain death. "Admiral, we have visual contact with the enemy fleet. Request permission to begin engagement." "Commander, the enemy is still 16 minutes away from your position." "There is no need to. Admiral, with respect, my weapons have longer range than your sensors might suggest. We can begin harassing fire now and start wearing them down before they reach close combat range." Cathara frowned. Human weapons were supposed to be primitive kinetic projectiles with limited range. How could they possibly reach targets that were still millions of kilometers away? "Commander, your weapon systems cannot possibly," Sean's image was replaced by a view from one of the human ships. Cathara watched in amazement as massive metal tubes along the ship's side began to move. They were enormous. Each one was at least 50 meters long and 10 meters wide. As he watched, the tubes elevated and turned to face the approaching enemy. "What in the name of the ancients are those?" Commander Vextel whispered before anyone could answer. The human ships opened fire. The weapons did not produce the elegant energy beams that civilized species preferred. Instead, they hurled solid metal projectiles into space at incredible speed. Each projectile was the size of a small vehicle, and they moved so fast that they appeared as brief streaks of light against the darkness. Impact in 47 seconds. Chan's voice said calmly over the communication channel. Cathara checked his sensors, not believing what he was seeing. The projectiles were moving at nearly 30% of light speed. At that velocity, even a small piece of metal would hit with the force of a nuclear weapon. Impossible, Vextel breathed. No kinetic weapon can achieve those velocities without massive power requirements. On the tactical display, the first wave of human projectiles reached the void swarm. Cathara expected to see small flashes as the primitive weapons were absorbed or deflected by the enemy's adaptive defenses. Instead, he watched in shock as 3 void entities simply exploded. The creatures that had shrugged off quantum disruptors and energy weapons were torn apart by simple metal slugs moving at incredible speed. Where the projectiles hit, massive holes appeared in the organic hulls. Strange fluids sprayed into space as the wounded entities writhed and died. Direct hits on 3 enemy vessels, Chun reported in the same calm voice. Continuing fire mission. The human fleet fired again and again. Each salvo sent dozens of projectiles screaming across space at impossible speeds. The void entities tried to adapt, growing thicker armor and changing their formation. Nothing worked. The kinetic energy was too much for their biological systems to absorb or redirect. How are they doing this? Cathara demanded of his science officer. Sir, preliminary analysis suggests they are using magnetic acceleration systems far more advanced than anything in our database. The power requirements should be enormous, but somehow they are managing continuous fire. On the screen, the human ships had become a wall of flashing light as their weapons fired over and over. The crude, blocky vessels no longer looked primitive. They looked like what they really were, weapons of war built by a species that had spent thousands of years perfecting the art of killing. The void swarm was in chaos. Entities that had never known defeat were dying in large numbers, torn apart by weapons they could not understand or counter. Their perfect coordination began to break down as fear and confusion spread through their collective mind. Sir, the enemy is changing course, Vextel reported with amazement in his voice. They are moving to avoid the human firing zone. It was true. The unstoppable void swarm was actually trying to run away from the human fleet. They had faced the most advanced weapons in the galaxy without fear, but these primitive projectiles terrified them. All human vessels. This is Admiral Cathara, he said into his communicator. Outstanding work, Commander Chun. Continue engaging at your discretion. Thank you, Admiral. But we are just getting started. Chun's words sent a chill down Cathara's spine. If this was just the beginning, what else were the humans hiding? He got his answer a few minutes later when the void swarm tried a new tactic. Unable to approach directly, they began splitting into smaller groups, trying to surround the human fleet and attack from multiple directions. The human response was immediate and devastating. Ships throughout their formation launched what appeared to be small fighter craft, but as they got closer to the enemy, Cathara realized they were not manned vehicles at all. They were missiles, but missiles unlike anything he had ever seen. Each missile was the size of a small starship and moved with the agility of a living creature. They swarmed around the void entities like angry insects, avoiding return fire with impossible grace. When they struck their targets, the explosions were so bright that the main screen had to dim automatically to protect the crew's eyes. Nuclear warheads, Chun explained when Cathara asked. Each one carries a 50-megaton fusion device. We call them Prometheus missiles. 50 megatons. Most civilized species had banned such weapons centuries ago as too destructive for civilized warfare. The humans not only built them, they fired them by the dozen without hesitation. The battle was turning into a massacre, but not the massacre Cathara had expected. Instead of watching brave human crews die heroically, he was watching the most feared enemy in galactic history get systematically destroyed by weapons that should not have been able to hurt them. Sir, Commander Vextel said quietly. Perhaps we should reconsider our assessment of human military capabilities. Cathara nodded, unable to take his eyes off the tactical display. The primitive, backward humans had just done something that the combined fleets of 6 advanced species could not do. They had made the Void Swarm afraid, and they were just getting started. The destruction of the Void Swarm was beautiful and terrible to watch. Admiral Cathara had seen many battles in his long career, but nothing like this. The enemy that had consumed entire star systems was being torn apart by weapons that most civilized species considered ancient and crude. 43 enemy vessels destroyed, Commander Vextel reported, his voice filled with disbelief. 17 more showing critical damage. The humans have eliminated over 60% of the Void Swarm in less than 20 minutes. On the tactical display, the remaining void entities were scattered across the system, no longer moving in their perfect formations. Some tried to flee toward the edge of the system, while others attempted desperate attacks on the human fleet. None of it worked. The human ships moved like hunting wolves, coordinating their attacks with deadly precision. "Sir, we are receiving reports from all Federation vessels," Lieutenant Yorth announced. Admiral Vexan of the Centauran fleet reports that his logic computers cannot explain what they are observing. Counselor Lyrish says her psychic abilities are being overwhelmed by human combat emotions. Cathara nodded without surprise. He could feel it too, the raw aggression and joy coming from the human fleet. While other species fought with careful calculation and reluctant necessity, the humans seemed to actually enjoy the battle. Their communications were filled with strange war cries and celebration as they destroyed their enemies. Contact from Commander Chun, sir. The main screen showed the human commander again. Her face was flushed with excitement, and her eyes held a wild light that made Cathara unconsciously step backward. Behind her, the human bridge crew worked with savage efficiency, calling out targets and coordinating attacks with frightening enthusiasm. Admiral Cathara, we have the main enemy force contained. Request permission to begin Phase 2 operations. Phase 2? Cathara asked. Commander, what is Phase 2? Chun's smile was not reassuring. Close-range combat, sir. We have some new toys we would like to test. Before Cathara could respond, the human fleet began to move. Instead of maintaining their safe distance, the ships accelerated toward the remaining void entities. This was madness. Every military doctrine in the galaxy emphasized the importance of range in space combat. Getting close to the enemy meant exposing yourself to their most dangerous weapons. Commander Chun, I strongly advise against close engagement. The void entities have demonstrated powerful energy absorption abilities at short range. Admiral, with respect, we know what we are doing. The human ships closed distance rapidly, their blocky forms moving with surprising grace through the debris field. As they approached the enemy, new weapons began to emerge from their hulls. Strange metal arms unfolded from hidden compartments, and massive drill-like devices extended from the ship's fronts. What in the name of the ancestors are those? Vextel whispered Dot. They got their answer when the first human ship reached a wounded void entity. Instead of firing missiles or energy weapons, the human vessel simply rammed into the creature at full speed. The drill-like device at the ship's front tore through the organic hull like it was made of soft tissue, but the ramming attack was just the beginning. Once the human ship was locked inside the void entity, the metal arms began to work. They carried massive cutting tools that sliced through the creature's internal structure, destroying vital organs and support systems. Within minutes, the massive entity was dead, its body drifting lifeless through space. They are boarding the enemy vessels, Cathara said in amazement. They are fighting hand-to-hand inside the creatures. It was insane. No civilized species would consider such brutal, direct combat. The idea of actually entering an enemy vessel and fighting with handheld weapons was something from primitive history, not modern warfare, and yet it was working perfectly. Human ship after human ship engaged in these boarding actions, tearing the void entities apart from the inside. The creatures had no defense against such tactics, because no species had ever been crazy enough to try them before. "Sir, we are picking up audio transmissions from inside the void entities," Lieutenant Yorth reported nervously. "Put it on speaker." The bridge filled with the sounds of combat. Human voices shouted orders and battle, cries over the noise of gunfire and explosions. The weapons they were using inside the creatures were clearly not the advanced energy devices preferred by other species. They were chemical explosives and kinetic firearms, weapons that made loud noises and caused massive physical damage. Sector 7 cleared, moving to the next compartment. "Watch out for that tentacle thing. Hit it with the flamethrower." Core. Chamber located. Deploying nuclear charges. Nuclear charges. The humans were using nuclear weapons inside the enemy vessels, at point-blank range with their own people. It was beyond reckless. It was completely insane. "Admiral," Commander Chun's voice came over the communication system. "We have successfully boarded and destroyed 8 enemy vessels. Estimate complete victory within 30 minutes. Commander, your people are using nuclear weapons in confined spaces. The radiation exposure alone should be fatal. Our armor provides adequate protection, sir. We have been preparing for this type of combat for a long time." As if to prove her point, another void entity exploded from the inside as human nuclear charges detonated in its core. The explosion was so bright that it lit up half the system, but the human ship that had delivered the charges emerged from the blast, apparently undamaged. Cathara realized that he was watching something unprecedented in galactic history. The humans had not just defeated the void swarm. They had done it using tactics that no other species would even consider. While the rest of the galaxy had evolved beyond physical violence, humans had perfected it into an art form. "Sir, the remaining enemy vessels are attempting to retreat," Vextel reported. On the tactical display, the last few void entities were indeed trying to flee. These creatures that had never known defeat were running away from an enemy they could not understand or counter, but the humans were not done with them. "All human vessels, this is Commander Chun. Begin pursuit operations. No enemy vessel leaves this system alive." The human fleet spread out like a net, cutting off the escape routes. Their ships moved with purpose and coordination that surprised even Cathara. For beings that were supposed to be primitive and chaotic, they certainly knew how to work together when it mattered. The chase did not last long. One by one, the fleeing void entities were hunted down and destroyed. Some were torn apart by the massive kinetic weapons. Others were boarded and blown up from the inside. A few tried to surrender, but the humans showed no mercy. "Last enemy. Vessel destroyed," Chun reported with satisfaction. "System is clear of hostile forces." Cathara looked at the tactical display in stunned silence. Where there had once been over 60 massive void entities, there was now only empty space and drifting debris. The enemy that had destroyed entire civilizations had been completely eliminated in less than 2 hours. "Casualty report from the human fleet," Lieutenant Yorth announced quietly. "How many ships did they lose?" Cathara asked, dreading the answer. "None. Sir, the humans report 0 ships destroyed and minimal damage to their vessels. Total human casualties are listed as 43 wounded, none killed, 0 ships lost. Against an enemy that had destroyed 3 Federation battle groups without taking significant damage, the humans had suffered no losses at all." "Admiral," Commander Chun's voice came over the communication system again. "Human fleet requests permission to begin salvage operations." We would like to study the enemy technology for future reference. Cathara found his voice after several seconds. Permission granted, Commander. And ... thank you. You have saved billions of lives today. Just doing our job, sir. Earth is proud to serve alongside our Federation allies. As the communication ended, Cathara realized that everything had changed. The humans were not primitive savages who could be used as cannon fodder. They were the most effective military force the galaxy had ever seen. And now they knew it too. For the first time since the battle began, Admiral Cathara felt afraid. But not of the Void Swarm. They were all dead. He was afraid of what came next. The celebration aboard the Federation vessels was unlike anything Admiral Cathara had ever witnessed. Throughout the combined fleet, alien crews who had expected to die were instead cheering their impossible victory. The Void Swarm was completely destroyed. The core systems were safe, and billions of lives had been saved, all because of the humans. Cathara watched the human fleet through his main screen as they continued their salvage operations. Their blocky ships moved efficiently through the debris field, collecting pieces of destroyed void entities for study. The same vessels that had looked crude and primitive just hours ago now seemed like instruments of perfect destruction. Sir, we are receiving congratulations from all Federation worlds, Lieutenant Yorth reported with obvious joy. The High Council is calling this the greatest military victory in galactic history. Indeed it is, Cathara replied, though his voice lacked enthusiasm. Commander Vextel noticed his superior's mood. Sir, is something wrong? We have won a complete victory with minimal losses. That is exactly the problem, Commander. Cathara turned away from the screen, his forearms clasped behind his back. He had been thinking hard during the past hour, and his thoughts were not pleasant. The humans had just demonstrated military capabilities that far exceeded anything the Federation possessed. They had destroyed an enemy that had defeated the best fleets of 6 advanced species combined. What did that mean for the future of galactic civilization? Sir, incoming priority transmission from the human fleet, Lieutenant Yorth announced. Put it through. Commander Chun appeared on the screen, her face still flushed with the excitement of battle. Behind her, human crew members continued their work with obvious satisfaction. They looked like hunters who had just completed a successful hunt. Admiral Cathara, preliminary analysis of the enemy vessels is complete. Our science teams have some very interesting findings to share with Federation researchers. We think this technology could revolutionize our understanding of biomechanical engineering. Excellent work, Commander. Your fleet's performance today has been remarkable. Thank you, sir. My people are proud to have served alongside our Federation allies. Admiral, there is one more thing. Our long-range sensors have detected 3 more Void Swarm groups approaching from different directions. They are still several days away, but we wanted to give you advance warning. More Void entities. Cathara felt his heart skip a beat. Even after this devastating defeat, the enemy was not finished. But as he looked at Chun's calm expression, he realized she was not afraid of the new threat. Commander, do you believe your fleet can handle additional enemy forces? Without question, sir. Now that we understand their capabilities and weaknesses, we can develop even more effective tactics. The next battles will be easier than this one. Chun signed off, leaving Cathara staring at a blank screen. The human commander had just casually dismissed a threat that had terrified the entire galaxy. She spoke of fighting more Void Swarms, like she was discussing routine training exercises. That was when the full magnitude of the situation hit him. The humans were not just effective fighters, they were too effective. They had capabilities that made every other military force in the galaxy obsolete. They had weapons that could destroy any enemy, tactics that no one could counter, and a willingness to use violence that other species had evolved beyond. More, Importantly, they now knew how powerful they really were. Commander Vextel, prepare a secure communication to Federation Command. Priority Alpha classification. Yes, sir. What should I tell them? Tell them we need to discuss the human situation. Immediately. But before Vextel could send the message, another communication came through from the human fleet. This time, it was not Chun, but a different human officer. A male with gray hair and cold eyes. Admiral Cathara, this is Captain Morrison of the Earth vessel Gettysburg. Commander Chun has asked me to coordinate our next phase of operations with your command staff? Next phase? Yes, sir. Now that we have secured this system, we need to plan our advance against the remaining Void Swarm groups. Our strategic analysis suggests we should take the fight to them before they can organize a proper counterattack. Cathara blinked in surprise. The humans wanted to continue fighting. They were not content with their defensive victory. They wanted to hunt down and destroy every remaining enemy. Captain Morrison, I appreciate your enthusiasm, but such operations would require extensive planning and coordination with Federation Command. We cannot simply, Admiral, with respect, we do not have time for extensive planning. Every hour we wait gives the enemy more time to adapt and prepare. We should strike while we have the advantage. The human captain's tone was polite but firm. He was not asking for permission. He was informing Cathara of what the humans intended to do. The realization sent a chill through the Zephyrian admiral's body. Captain, I understand your eagerness to continue the fight, but tactical decisions of this magnitude must be approved by proper authorities. The Federation has protocols. Admiral, Morrison interrupted. The Federation protocols just got 300 billion sentient beings killed across 12 star systems. Our protocols just saved this entire sector. Which approach would you prefer? We follow? The brutal directness of the statement left Cathara speechless. The human was right, and they both knew it. Federation military doctrine had failed, completely against the Void Swarm. Only human methods had worked. That was the moment when Admiral Cathara made the mistake that would change galactic history forever. His pride, already wounded by his species' military failure, could not accept the implication that humans were superior to the advanced civilizations of the Federation. The idea that these primitive warriors might dictate strategy to their betters was unthinkable. Captain Morrison, I understand that your recent success may have given you confidence in your abilities. However, I must remind you that this was a single engagement against a limited enemy force. Your tactics, while effective, were crude and wasteful. Under proper Federation guidance, such methods could be refined and improved. The silence that followed lasted several seconds. When Morrison spoke again, his voice was very quiet. I see. And what kind of guidance did you have in mind, Admiral? Well, naturally your fleet would be integrated into our command structure as auxiliary forces. Your people have shown promise as shock troops, and with proper training and discipline, they could become valuable assets to Federation military operations. Another long silence. Auxiliary forces, Morrison repeated slowly. Yes, think of it as an honor, Captain. Few species earn the right to serve directly under Federation command. Your ships would be assigned to forward assault roles, where your aggressive tactics would be most useful. Cathara was pleased with how diplomatic he sounded. He was offering the humans a place in the galactic military structure, recognition of their abilities, and important responsibilities. Any reasonable species would be grateful for such an opportunity. Morrison's response was not what he expected. Admiral, let me make sure I understand this correctly. You are suggesting that the fleet that just saved your entire civilization should now serve as subordinate auxiliaries under your command? Captain, I would not put it in such crude terms, but essentially, yes. The Federation has centuries of experience in military coordination and strategic planning. Human forces would benefit greatly from such guidance. I see. Morrison paused. Again, Admiral, please hold for a moment while I consult with my commanding officer. The screen went dark. Cathara turned to Commander Vextel with satisfaction. There, you see, a firm but fair approach. The humans need to understand their place in the larger galactic community. Sir, Vextel said nervously, perhaps we should reconsider this approach. The humans just demonstrated capabilities far beyond our own. Maybe we should treat them as equals rather than subordinates. Nonsense, Commander. Military effectiveness alone does not determine political standing. The Federation was built by civilized species with thousands of years of cultural development. We cannot allow primitive warriors to dictate policy simply because they are good at fighting. The screen flickered back to life, but this time it showed Commander Chun instead of Captain Morrison. Her expression was completely calm, but something in her eyes made Cathara's blood run cold. Admiral Cathara, she said in a voice like ice, I understand you have some thoughts about the future role of human forces in Federation military operations. Commander Chun, Captain Morrison, and I were discussing integration procedures. Admiral, let me stop you right there. Are you seriously suggesting that the fleet that just saved your worthless hides should now take orders from the people who led 3 battle groups to complete destruction? The blunt hostility in Chun's voice shocked Cathara. This was not the respectful subordinate he had been speaking with hours earlier. Commander, I understand you may be emotional after the battle, but emotional? Chun's voice cut through his words like a blade. Admiral, I am perfectly calm. Computer, execute Protocol Omega. All human vessels, new target priorities now. In effect, throughout the human fleet, weapons that had just finished destroying the Void Swarm began to turn. The massive kinetic cannons and missile.
The stars looked cold from the viewing deck of the Alliance flagship Defiance. Commander Allison Gray stood alone, watching as bright flashes lit up the darkness of space. Each flash meant another Alliance ship was gone, another few hundred soldiers, dead. She pressed her hand against the clear barrier as if she could somehow reach out and stop what was happening. Commander Gray, they're asking for you in the war room, said a young officer behind her. Allison nodded without turning around. Tell them I'll be there in 5 minutes. The young officer left, and Allison took a deep breath. At 43, she had spent more than 20 years in military service. The last 17 of those years had been fighting the Viridian Collective. The Viridians were not living beings, but machines with a shared mind. They wanted to destroy or control all living creatures in the galaxy, and they were winning. Allison turned away from the viewing deck and walked through the long hallways of the Defiance. Crew members moved quickly out of her way. Some gave her respectful nods. Others looked at her with hope in their eyes. It made her uncomfortable. She was just a soldier who had survived longer than most. The war room was filled with leaders from the 12 species that made up the Galactic Alliance. Humans were the newest members. They had only joined when the Viridians reached Earth's solar system 7 years ago. General Kralvox, a tall insect-like being with 4 arms and compound eyes, looked up as she entered. Commander Gray, good. We were just reviewing the latest battle reports. The large table in the center of the room showed a 3D map of the galaxy. Red areas showed where the Viridians controlled space. Blue showed Alliance territory. There was much more red than blue, and the red was spreading. We lost the Proxima colony, said Admiral Zen, a blue-skinned alien with no hair. The evacuation, ships got most of the civilians out, but our defense fleet was destroyed. Allison studied the map. What about the Arcturus system? It will be next, said General Kralvox. Our models predict an attack within 2 weeks. After that, they will have a clear path to 3 more core worlds. The room grew quiet. Everyone knew what that meant. If the core worlds fell, the Alliance would collapse. Our models predict total Alliance defeat within 6 standard months, said the general, his voice making a clicking sound that showed his species' version of sadness. Allison looked around the room. These leaders had fought bravely for years, but they were tired. They were starting to accept defeat as unavoidable. "Your models are missing something," Allison said. Admiral Zen raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean, Commander?" "They're missing the human factor," she replied. "Earth has been holding back its main fighting forces. We've sent resources, ships, and some troops, but our best soldiers, our special forces, have been training for something else." This got everyone's attention. The alien leaders looked at each other in surprise. "What exactly are you suggesting?" asked General Kralvox. Allison touched the map controls. The view zoomed in on a planet that glowed bright red. "This is Nexus 4. It was one of our colony worlds until the Viridians took it 3 years ago. Our intelligence suggests they've built one of their main processing centers there." "We know this," said a reptilian commander. "But the planet is too well defended. We couldn't get close with a fleet, let alone land troops." "You couldn't," Allison agreed. "But humans can." She pressed another button, and the image changed to show a military base on Earth. Thousands of soldiers were training in conditions that looked almost impossible to survive. For the past 5 years, Earth has been developing a special program, soldiers who can do what your military experts say is impossible. We call them the Impossible Forces. "What makes them different?" asked Admiral Zen, looking doubtful. "Everything," said Allison. "The way they think, the way they fight. The Viridians calculate every move based on logic and survival. These soldiers are trained to make choices that no logical being would predict." She showed them more images. Soldiers running into fire that should kill them. Troops achieving objectives despite taking losses that would make any normal military unit retreat. "The Viridians beat us because they can predict what we will do," Allison continued. "They know no commander would send troops into a situation with a 90% chance of death. But these soldiers would go. And the 10% who survive would complete the mission." The room was silent again, but this time it was different. There was a feeling of both horror and hope. "You're talking about suicide missions," said Admiral Zen finally. "I'm talking about the only way to win this war," Allison replied firmly. "We hit Nexus 4 with these soldiers. If we can damage their main processing center, it would disrupt the Viridian network across 3 sectors. It would give us time to launch a larger attack." General Kralvox studied the images carefully. "How many of these soldiers do you have?" 2,000 are ready now. They've been training for this specific mission for over a year." The general's compound eyes reflected the light from the display. "And their commander agrees with this plan?" Allison nodded. "Captain Jack Miller designed most of it himself." On a military transport ship heading toward the Defiance, Captain Jack Miller watched his soldiers prepare their equipment. At 35, he had the look of someone who had seen too much fighting. Scars crossed his face, and his eyes had the steady gaze of a man who had made peace with death long ago. Next to him stood Sergeant Kelly Thompson, checking her weapon with practiced hands. "The troops are ready, sir," she said. "They know this mission could be one way." Jack nodded. "Make sure they understand the objective. We're not trying to take back the planet. We just need to hit the processing center and get out." "If we can, get out," Kelly said quietly. "If we can get out," Jack agreed. "But even if we don't, as long as one team reaches that core, we change the course of this war." Lieutenant Alan Boyd joined them, carrying digital maps of their target. "Sir, I think I found a weakness in their defense grid. If we come in at these angles," he pointed to the display, "their sensors might not detect us until it's too late." Jack studied the approach. It was risky. The entry angle was so steep that many drop pods might burn up in the atmosphere, but those that made it through would land almost on top of their target. "It's our best shot," he decided. "Tell the pilots to adjust course. We drop in 10 hours. As the soldiers continued their preparations, Jack looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there was a planet called Nexus 4, and on that planet was a chance, maybe their last chance, to prove that humanity wouldn't fall without a fight. The Defiance moved through space, now carrying humanity's best hope. The war that had seemed impossible to win was about to change. The Viridians didn't know it yet, but they were about to learn what humans could do when pushed to their limits. The large meeting room on the Defiance was filled with Alliance leaders. They watched in silence as Allison Gray finished showing her plan. The room's screens displayed battle simulations that went against everything the Alliance believed about modern warfare. "This is not just risky," said Admiral Zen, his blue skin looking almost pale. "It is suicide. Your soldiers would face death rates of more than 70%, and yet they will still volunteer," Allison replied calmly. "That is what you have never understood about humans." General Kralvox clicked his mandibles together, a sign of deep thought among his people. "Even if I approved this plan, the Council would never agree to it." "We don't need the full Council's approval," Allison said. "Earth is providing the soldiers. We only need permission to use Alliance ships to get them close enough for the drop." "And if they fail?" asked a reptilian commander. "Then we are no worse off than we are now," Allison said simply. "But if they succeed, we gain time to gather our forces for a real attack." After hours of debate, the leaders finally agreed. Not because they believed the plan would work, but because they had no better options. As they filed out of the room, Admiral Zen stopped beside Allison. "I have studied human history," he said quietly. "Your people have a strange relationship with death. You fear it, yet you run toward it when you believe in a cause." Allison looked at him steadily. "We don't run toward death, Admiral. We run toward life. Sometimes the path just happens to go through death." The Admiral nodded slowly. "I will pray to my ancestors for your soldiers." In the main hangar bay of the Defiance, Captain Jack Miller stood before 2,000 of Earth's best soldiers. The enormous space was completely silent as they waited for him to speak. These men and women had trained together for years, preparing for a mission many thought would never happen. "The mission I'm about to describe has been called impossible by every military expert in the Alliance," Jack said, his voice carrying across the silent formation. "Command is calling it Operation Thunderclap. I'm calling it our only chance to turn this war around." Jack activated a large display showing Nexus 4, a planet that had once been home to millions of Alliance citizens. Now it was a Viridian stronghold, worrying. "Target is here," he said, zooming in on a massive structure that covered several square miles. "The Viridians have built their central processing hub on this planet. It connects and coordinates their forces across 3 sectors of space." The soldiers remained silent, but their eyes were fixed on the images. "We will deploy and drop pods designed to evade their detection systems," Jack continued. "Each team has been assigned a specific entry point and path to the central core. If even one team reaches the core and plants these," he held up a small device, "we disrupt their entire network. We give the Alliance time to launch a real counterattack." Sergeant Kelly Thompson stood in the front row, next to Lieutenant Allen Boyd. They had fought together since the early battles on Mars, surviving situations that should have killed them many times. "The Viridians have calculated every part of this war except one," Jack said, his voice growing stronger. "They have not accounted for the human ability to do the impossible when our backs are against the wall. They think we fight to win. They're wrong. We fight because we refuse to lose." He looked across the faces of the soldiers. "This mission has a 30% survival rate at best. Anyone who wants to stay behind can do so without shame. You have 1 hour to decide." 1 hour later, not a single soldier had left. In the preparation area, Kelly checked her gear one last time. Her hands moved quickly over the specialized weapons and tools they would need on Nexus 4. Nearby, Alan was studying the map of their target, memorizing every detail. "Do you think we can really do this?" Kelly asked quietly. Alan looked up from the map. "I think some of us will die trying, but yeah, I think we'll do it." "Such confidence," she said with a small smile. "It's not confidence, it's math," he replied. 2,000 of us. Multiple paths to the target. We only need one team to make it through. The odds favor us, even if most of us don't come back." Kelly nodded. They had both accepted the reality of this mission long ago. "I just hope it's enough to make a difference." "It will be," said a voice behind them. They turned to see Jack approaching. The latest intel just came in. The Viridians are gathering a massive fleet at Arcturus. Most of their computational focus We'll be there, planning their next big push, which means less attention on Nexus 4, Alan said, immediately understanding the advantage. Exactly, Jack confirmed. We launch in 3 hours. Get your teams ready. As Jack walked away, Kelly looked at her weapons again. I didn't join the military to die, she said softly. But I did join to protect what matters. We all did, Alan agreed. And sometimes that means taking risks no one else will take. 3 hours later, the soldiers were loading into their drop pods. These small vessels were designed for one purpose only, to enter a planet's atmosphere at angles and speeds that normal ships couldn't survive. They had no weapons and minimal shielding. Their only defense was that they were too small and too fast for most detection systems to track. In the command center of the Defiance, Allison Gray watched as the first wave of pods were launched. They looked tiny against the backdrop of space, like seeds being scattered into the wind. May they find their target, General Kralvok said beside her, showing rare emotion. They will, Allison said with quiet certainty. That's what humans do. We find a way. The drop pods accelerated toward Nexus 4, beginning their dangerous descent. Inside one of them, Jack braced himself against the increasing pressure. The pod shook violently as it hit the upper atmosphere. Warning lights flashed across the control panel. The temperature inside rose quickly despite the cooling systems working at full capacity. In another pod, Kelly gripped her harness tightly. As her vessel spun wildly, the stabilizers were failing. Next to her, a young soldier named Sam Parker looked terrified but determined. We're coming in too steep, Sam shouted over the roar of the atmosphere burning against their hull. Trust the trajectory, Kelly shouted back. It's supposed to be steep. They won't be looking for anything coming in at this angle. Across the sky above Nexus 4, 144 drop pods streaked through the atmosphere like falling stars. Some began to break apart under the intense pressure and heat. Others managed to correct their course just enough to survive the descent. On the planet's surface, at the massive Viridian processing facility, sensors detected unusual atmospheric disturbances. But the pattern recognition systems classified most of them as meteors, small space debris burning up on entry. Nothing that would warrant pulling computational resources away from the planned attack at Arcturus. It was the first mistake in the Viridian's perfect calculation, and it would not be the last. Fire and pain. That was all Lieutenant Alan Boyd felt as his drop pod hit the surface of Nexus 4. The landing was harder than it should have been. Warning alarms screamed inside the small space. Emergency lights flashed red. Smoke filled the air. Alan pulled himself from his harness, ignoring the blood running down his face from a cut above his eye. He tried the pod's door. It was stuck. With a grunt, he kicked at it 3 times before it finally broke open. The air outside was cold and smelled like chemicals. Alan grabbed his weapon and pack, then crawled out of the broken pod. His team was supposed to have 5 members. He looked around quickly for the other pods. He saw one about 50 yards away. It was mostly intact. Another was burning about 100 yards in the other direction. There was no sign of the other 2. Alan moved to the closest pod. Inside was Sergeant Kelly Thompson. She was already out of her harness and checking her gear. When she saw Alan, a small smile crossed her face. Worried I wouldn't make it? She asked. Never, Alan replied. Where are the others? Kelly's smile faded. I saw Mason's pod break up in the atmosphere. Not sure about the other 2. They heard a noise behind them and spun around, weapons ready. It was Sam Parker, the young soldier who had been in Kelly's pod. He was limping but appeared otherwise unhurt. Rodriguez is over there, Sam said, pointing to another intact pod about 200 yards away. He's alive but hurt. I don't see any sign of Harrison. Alan checked his wrist device. It showed a map of the area with small dots representing other surviving team members. Many dots were missing. We need to link up with Captain Miller's team, Alan said. They should be about half a mile east of us. Kelly nodded. I'll get Rodriguez. You 2 secure our gear and destroy the pods. We can't leave anything for the Viridians to find. While Kelly went to help the injured soldier, Alan and Sam placed small explosive charges on the drop pods. The charges were designed to melt the pods into unrecognizable metal without making much noise. "How many do you think made it?" Sam asked quietly. Alan looked at his device again. "Maybe half. Hard to tell with the interference from the facility." "That's not enough," Sam said, his voice tight with worry. "It only takes one team to reach the core," Alan reminded him. "That's all we need." 15 minutes later, the 4 soldiers moved quickly through the barren landscape. Nothing grew on this part of Nexus 4 anymore. The Viridians had stripped the area of all plant life to build their facility. The ground was hard and black, like burnt rock. They kept low and moved from one pile of debris to another. The processing facility rose in the distance, a massive structure that seemed to stretch for miles. Its metal surfaces reflected the dim light of the planet's distant sun. Alan's device beeped softly. Another team was nearby. They changed direction slightly, and soon saw 4 figures crouched behind a large piece of broken machinery. "Friendly," Alan said quietly into his comm unit. "Approach slowly," came the response. As they got closer, Alan recognized Captain Jack Miller. The captain looked rougher than usual. His uniform was torn, and dried blood covered one side of his face. "Boyd." Jack nodded as they reached his position. "Thompson, good to see you made it." "What's our status, sir?" Kelly asked. Jack's face was grim. "Not good. I've got reports from 8 teams. That's less than half. Teams 3 and 7 are completely gone." "What about our entry point?" Alan asked. "Still viable," Jack replied. "But we've lost most of our heavy weapons in the drop. We'll have to change the plan." He brought up a holographic map on a small projector. It showed their position and the massive facility ahead of them. "The facility has 5 main entry points," Jack explained. "Each is heavily guarded by automated defenses. We were going to hit all 5 at once to spread their response thin. Now we'll focus on just one, the maintenance shaft here." He pointed to a spot on the east side of the facility. "That's the most heavily defended point," Kelly said with a frown. "Which is why they won't expect us to hit it," Jack replied, "especially not with our reduced numbers. We'll split into 3 groups. The first group will create a diversion at the north entrance. The second will hit the power relays here." He pointed to another spot on the map. "That should create enough confusion for the third group to enter through the maintenance shaft." "Who goes where?" asked one of Jack's team members. "I'll lead the third group into the facility," Jack said. "Boyd, you take the power relays. Thompson, the diversion." Kelly frowned. "The diversion team isn't coming back, is it?" Jack met her eyes. "That's why I'm asking for volunteers only." Without hesitation, Sam Parker stepped forward. "I'll go with Sergeant Thompson." 2 of Jack's team members also volunteered. Kelly looked at them with respect in her eyes. "We move in 30 minutes, Jack said. "Get ready." While the others prepared their gear, Kelly pulled Alan aside. "If you make it to the core," she said quietly, "make it count." Alan nodded. "Same to you with the diversion. Make it big." "Oh, I plan to," she said with a small smile. "The Viridians won't know what hit them." 30 minutes later, the 3 teams moved out. Kelly's team headed north, keeping low and moving quickly. Alan's team went west toward the power relays. Jack's team waited, watching their wrist devices for the signal to move. Kelly's team reached the north entrance first. It was guarded by tall towers with automated weapon systems. The area in front of the entrance was open with no cover, a death zone. "Ready the charges," Kelly told her team. They had taken all the remaining explosives from the other teams. "We'll need to get closer," Sam said, looking at the distance to the entrance. Kelly nodded. "That's why we run." She took a deep breath, then spoke into her comm unit. "Diversion team in position. Starting our run in 3, 2, 1. Kelly and her team burst from their hiding place, sprinting across the open ground toward the entrance. The automated defenses immediately detected them. Alarms wailed. Weapons turned toward them. "Keep moving," Kelly shouted as energy blasts hit the ground around them. They were halfway to the entrance when the first blast hit one of Jack's team members. The soldier fell without a sound. Kelly and the others kept running. At the power relay station, Alan heard the alarms. "That's our cue," he told his team. "Move now." His team rushed toward the small building that housed the power relays. Unlike the main entrance, this area had only minimal defenses. The Viridians hadn't expected anyone to reach this far into their territory. Alan placed explosive charges on the main power conduits while his team secured the area. His hands worked quickly, setting each charge with practiced precision. "Charges set," he reported into his comm unit. "Detonating in 30 seconds. At the north entrance, Kelly's team had reached the doors. Sam was placing explosives, while Kelly and the remaining team member provided cover fire against the automated defenses. "Charges ready," Sam called. Kelly nodded. "On my mark. 3, 2, 1. The explosives at both the north entrance and the power relay detonated simultaneously. The ground shook. The night sky lit up with fire. The sound was deafening. And in that moment of chaos, Jack's team made their move toward the maintenance shaft and the heart of the Viridian facility. The maintenance shaft entrance was hidden in the shadow of the massive facility. Captain Jack Miller and his 3 remaining team members moved quickly toward it as explosions lit up the night sky on the other side of the complex. Alarms wailed in the distance. "The diversion is working," said Frank Lewis, Jack's communications expert. "Most of the defense systems are focused on the north entrance." Jack nodded. "Let's move before they figure out what we're doing." The maintenance shaft was sealed with a heavy metal door. Under normal circumstances, it would have been impossible to open without setting off more alarms. But with the facilities, power systems damaged by Alan's team, many of the security measures were offline. Joe Wells, their tech specialist, worked quickly on the door controls. His fingers moved over the alien technology with practiced ease. After a minute, the door slid open with a soft hiss. "We're in," Joe whispered. Jack tapped his comm unit. "Team 1 has entry. Boyd, what's your status?" Alan's voice came through, with static. "Power relays destroyed. Moving to secondary position now." "Thompson?" There was a pause. Then Kelly's voice, breathless and strained. "Still keeping them busy, sir. Lost Parker. Don't wait for us." Jack felt a tightness in his chest, but pushed it aside. "Copy that. Stay alive as long as you can." He led his team into the maintenance shaft. Unlike the outside of the facility, which was sleek and imposing, the inside was cramped and utilitarian. Pipes and cables ran along the walls and ceiling. The lighting was dim, with emergency red lights casting eerie shadows. "According to the intel, we need to go down 3 levels," Jack said quietly. "The central processing core should be there." They moved deeper into the facility, using the confusion caused by the attacks to avoid detection. Occasionally they heard the heavy metallic sounds of Viridian security units moving through nearby corridors. The Viridians weren't like humans. They didn't have individual bodies. Instead, they used robotic units connected to their shared consciousness. Each unit looked like a metal spider, about the size of a large dog with multiple limbs ending in tools or weapons. "How much farther?" asked Lisa Chen, their demolitions expert. 2 more junctions, Joe replied, checking a small device that mapped their route. As they reached the first junction, they heard the distinctive sound of Viridian units approaching. Jack signaled for the team to hide in a small maintenance alcove. They pressed themselves into the shadows as 5 Viridian units moved past, their metal legs clicking on the floor. When the danger had passed, the team continued on. The second junction was clear, and they began to believe they might reach their target without a fight. They were wrong. As they approached the final descent to the processing core level, an alarm suddenly sounded directly above them. Red lights flashed more intensely. "They've detected us," Jack said. "Move now." The team broke into a run, abandoning stealth for speed. Behind them, they could hear Viridian units converging on their position. The sound of metal legs on metal floors grew louder. They reached a large door marked with alien symbols. Joe immediately went to work on the control panel. "This will take a minute," he said, his voice tense. "We don't have a minute," Jack replied, looking back the way they had come. The sounds of pursuit were Getting closer, Lisa stepped forward. I'll slow them down. She took several small devices from her pack and moved back toward the junction. Jack wanted to stop her but knew someone had to buy them time. He nodded once and Lisa gave him a tight smile before disappearing around the corner. Joe continued, working on the door as Jack and Frank prepared to defend their position. Within seconds, they heard weapons fire from the direction Lisa had gone, followed by explosions and the screech of damaged Viridian units. Almost got it, Joe muttered, his fingers working frantically on the controls. The door began to slide open just as Lisa came running back around the corner. Her left arm was bleeding badly, and part of her uniform was burned away. "Move!" she shouted. "More coming." The team rushed through the door into a large circular room. In the center was a towering structure of metal and light, the processing core. Energy pulsed through it in waves of blue and white. The air hummed with power. "Seal the door," Jack ordered. Joe slammed his hand on the interior control panel and the heavy door slid shut. They could hear Viridian units crashing against it from the other side. "That won't hold them for long," Lisa said, clutching her injured arm. "It doesn't need to," Jack replied. He turned to face the core. "We just need enough time to plant the charges." Lisa nodded and opened her pack, revealing several specialized devices, the EMP charges designed specifically to disrupt Viridian systems. Despite her injury, her hands were steady as she began preparing them. Frank moved to the control terminal surrounding the core, using his limited knowledge of Viridian systems to try to understand what they were seeing. "This is bigger than we thought," he said after a moment. "This isn't just a regional processor. According to these readings, this core coordinates Viridian activities across at least a third of their territory." Jack felt a surge of hope. "That means if we take it out, we hurt them badly," Frank finished. "Really badly." The door behind them shuddered as something heavy slammed into it. Metal groaned under the pressure. "Charges ready," Lisa announced. Jack nodded. "Place them at the junction points. We want to disrupt the core, not destroy it completely." "Why not destroy it?" Joe asked. "Because a complete destruction might trigger their backup systems," Jack explained. "We want to corrupt their data, not, just erase it. That will take them longer to fix." Lisa and Frank moved around the core, placing charges at specific points where energy conduits met. Each charge was carefully calibrated to release a precise electromagnetic pulse that would scramble the data within the system without completely frying it. The door buckled inward as the Viridian units continued their assault. 30 seconds, Jack warned as Lisa placed the final charge. "Done," she said, stepping back. "Ready to activate on your command." Jack looked at his team, 3 soldiers who had come farther than anyone thought possible. "Set timers for 2 minutes. That should give us enough time to reach the exit shaft." They programmed the charges and were about to move when the door finally gave way. Viridian units poured into the room, their weapons charging. "Go!" Jack shouted. "Exit shaft now." His team ran for the small maintenance tunnel on the far side of the room that should lead them to the surface. Jack provided covering fire, his weapon sending pulses of energy that temporarily disrupted the Viridian unit's systems. Lisa reached the shaft first and climbed in. Frank followed. Joe was halfway there when a Viridian energy blast caught him in the back. He fell forward, his body smoking. Jack continued firing as he backed toward the shaft. The charges would detonate in less than a minute whether they were clear or not. He reached Joe's body and checked for signs of life. Finding none, he grabbed Joe's pack, which contained their remaining explosives, and continued toward the exit. He was almost there when the first Viridian unit caught up to him. Its metal limbs wrapped around his leg, pulling him down. Jack turned and fired directly into the unit's sensor array, destroying it. But more were coming. The countdown in his head reached 30 seconds. 25 seconds. Jack Miller kicked hard at the Viridian unit holding his leg. Its grip was like iron. More units were closing in fast. He knew he wouldn't make it to the exit shaft in time. With a quick decision, Jack took Joe's pack and threw it toward the shaft where Frank and Lisa were waiting. "Go," he shouted. "Get clear and report back to command." Frank caught the pack, his face showing both understanding and pain. "Captain, that's an order. Move." Jack saw Lisa pull Frank into the exit shaft just as more Viridian units reached him. He fought hard, disabling 2 more with direct hits to their sensor arrays. But there were too many. Metal limbs wrapped around his arms and legs, pinning him down. 15 seconds. Jack stopped fighting. A strange calm came over him. He had known from the start that this mission might be one way. What mattered was that the charges were set. The mission would succeed even if he didn't make it out. 10 seconds. On the Defiance, Commander Allison Gray stood tense and still in the command center. Around her, Alliance officers watched their screens, hoping for any sign from the teams on Nexus. "HFY, it's been too long," Admiral Zen said quietly. "We should assume the mission failed." "Not yet," Allison replied, her eyes fixed on the main screen. "Give them time." 5 seconds. In the exit shaft, Lisa and Frank climbed as fast as they could. The narrow tunnel seemed endless. Behind them, they could hear Viridian units entering. "The shaft. We're not going to make it," Frank gasped. "Yes, we are," Lisa said through gritted teeth. "Keep moving. 0. Deep in the heart of the Viridian facility, the EMP charges activated simultaneously. There was no explosion, no fire, no dramatic blast. Just a pulse of energy that spread outward through the processing core. Jack watched as the blue-white energy flowing through the core suddenly stuttered. The lights flickered. The Viridian units holding him froze in place, their limbs still locked around his body. Then one by one they released him and fell to the floor, temporarily disabled by the pulse. Jack didn't waste the opportunity. He scrambled to his feet and ran for the exit shaft. The core was still online, but its energy patterns had changed. Instead of the smooth, organized flow from before, it now pulsed in irregular patterns. Errors were spreading through the system. In the command center of the Defiance, the screen suddenly lit up with new data. "Commander," called a sensor officer, "we're detecting unusual energy patterns from the Viridian facility on Nexus 4. Allison stepped forward, her heart beating faster. "What kind of patterns?" "Disruption patterns. Their system is experiencing cascading errors." A cheer went up from the Alliance officers. Allison allowed herself a small smile. "They did it," she said, softly. General Kralvok stepped to her side. "It appears so, but at what cost?" That was the question Allison had been asking herself since proposing this mission. How many lives was victory worth? It was a calculation the Viridians made without emotion. For humans, it was never that simple. On Nexus 4, Alan Boyd and his team had reached the rendezvous point after destroying the power relays. They waited in the shadow of a large rock formation, watching for any signs of the other teams. "Someone's coming," one of his team members said, pointing to movement in the distance. Alan raised his weapon, ready for Viridian units. But instead, he saw 2 human figures stumbling across the barren ground. He recognized Frank and Lisa, though both looked badly injured. Alan ran to meet them, helping Lisa when she stumbled. "Where's the captain?" he asked, already fearing the answer. "He stayed behind," Frank said, his voice hollow, "to make sure the charges went off." "Did they work?" Alan asked. Lisa nodded. "The core is corrupted, not destroyed, but damaged in a way that will take them time to repair." Alan looked toward the facility in the distance. Part of him wanted to go back to try to find Jack, but he knew that wasn't the mission. The mission was to get back to the Alliance with news that the operation had succeeded. "What about Kelly's team?" Lisa asked. Alan shook his head. "No contact. We have to assume they didn't make it." They were preparing to move to the extraction point when Alan's comm unit crackled with static. A voice came through, weak but clear. "Boyd, do you copy?" Alan couldn't believe it. "Captain, is that you?" "In the flesh," Jack replied. "Though not all of it. Made it out through a secondary exit. Could use some help getting to the extraction point." New hope surged through Alan. "On my way, sir. Send your coordinates." 2 hours later, at the extraction point, Alan and his team waited with Jack, Frank, and Lisa for the Alliance shuttle. Jack's right leg was badly damaged, where a Viridian unit had grabbed him and he had burns across his back. But he was alive. The extraction shuttle appeared in the sky, a welcome sight against the dim light of Nexus-4's distant sun. "I didn't expect to see this view again," Jack admitted as they watched the shuttle descend. "None of us did," Alan agreed. "Do you think it was worth it? All the lives we lost?" Jack was quiet for a moment. "Ask me when we see what happens next. If the Alliance uses this opportunity well, then yes." The shuttle landed, its ramp extending to the ground. As they prepared to board, Alan saw movement in the distance. He raised his weapon, then lowered it in shock. "I don't believe it," he whispered. Limping toward them was Kelly Thompson. Her uniform was torn and burned. Blood covered half her face. But she was smiling. "You're late," she called as she got closer. "I've been waiting at this extraction point for an hour." Jack laughed, a sound none of them had heard in a long time. "That's why I made you a sergeant, Thompson. You're too stubborn to die." They boarded the shuttle together, the 5 surviving members of Operation Thunderclap. As the shuttle rose into the sky, they looked down at the Viridian facility. From the outside, it appeared unchanged. But they knew that inside, chaos was spreading through the Viridian network. On the Defiance, Allison Gray received the news that Jack's team had been extracted safely. She immediately went to the war room, where the Alliance leaders were already gathering. "The mission was a success," she announced. "The Viridian Processing Core has been corrupted. According to our intelligence, their network across 3 sectors is experiencing errors and communication breakdowns." "How long will this advantage last?" asked Admiral Zen. "Our analysts estimate 3 months before they can fully restore their systems," Allison replied. 3 months where their coordination will be compromised. 3 months where they can't effectively counter a major offensive. General Kralvox studied the strategic map. "Can your human soldiers do more of these operations?" Allison nodded. "They can and they will. But first we need to use this opportunity we've earned with their blood. We need to launch a full-scale counterattack while the Viridians are vulnerable." The Alliance leaders looked at each other. For the first time in years, there was something new in their eyes. Hope. 3 days later, Jack Miller stood with Kelly Thompson, Alan Boyd, Lisa Chen, and Frank Lewis on the observation deck of the Defiance. Below them, a massive fleet was assembling, the largest offensive force the Alliance had gathered since the early days of the war. "Operation Avalanche," Jack said, reading the mission name from his datapad. "They're really going for it." "Because of what we did down there," Kelly said quietly. "All because of what every team did down there," Alan corrected, "including those who didn't make it back." They watched as more ships arrived, joining the growing armada. This was just the beginning. The war was far from over. But for the first time in 17 years, the Alliance was no longer fighting to delay defeat. They were fighting to win. Victory had been impossible until battle-tested human soldiers took action. Now the impossible had become possible, and the Viridians were about to learn what humans could really do when given a fighting chance.